Welcome to the Australian Property Investment Podcast with your host, Aaron-Christie David. Each episode, we ask an expert to share their key insights for aspiring investors to make confident property choices.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. My name is Aaron-Christie David. I'm a mortgage broker and founder of a business called Atelier Wealth. In these episodes, we kind of ask the hard-hitting questions of best in breed, people in their industries, experts in their field, just to go deep on some specific questions that clients have asked us, and we know that our listeners have asked us to ask you. In this episode, we're joined by Arjun Paliwal, Head of Research, but also founder of InvestorKit. G'day, mate. Welcome.
Mate, good to be here,
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's been a little while coming. We've known each other for quite some years. And just as a way of background, we've got an interesting past, don't we? We kind of had our backgrounds working at the big bank of CBA.
Big CBA.
And then I guess we got to the point that, kind of different times, but we probably got itchy feet being inside a big bank and thought, how can we do it different? How can we do it our way? And stepping out into our own respective businesses, me in finance and you into the buyer's agency world, and kind of see where you've gone, man. I'm super proud of everything you've achieved.
And right back at you, dude.
Thanks, man.
Don't sell yourself short.
And I think the other part is we've both broken the golden rule in business. We both work with our spouse, our respective other, and that's probably why we do okay in business, because we've got someone like them having our backs and running the businesses, mate. So how you doing?
Mate, all is well this way. And no, look, it's some interesting parts. And I was always laughing because whenever I hear from you or we talk to each other, I'm always like, man, I remember just having this whole 1 month phase on my Facebook, right? Maybe 2 months. And it was nothing but everyone hyping you up for your ring fight. And I always give it to you. I was like, dude, when are you stepping in the ring next? Or that was pretty cool though, right? It was a cool experience.
Man. I appreciate that. And back in the time when I had a little bit more free time, pre-children, had my first amateur fight at the Star, and you're a very big supporter, mate. So I appreciate that. I will shake off the dad bod and get back into the ring sometime, I hope, mate. That's for sure.
Man, it's a lot more for a shake-up than me. I've got a lot to do.
Mate, I recommend it to anyone, actually. It's nothing like jumping in the ring to get the adrenaline going, that's for sure. It's training, cool. Man. Best training you'll ever do, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. What I want us to have a chat today about is you're a buyer's agent, I'd say with a difference, right? A lot of buyer's agents, and you've got your own portfolio, so you've been there, done that. So I definitely get it. But you almost pride yourself on being the property nerd. That's what you've called, your other business or your other project, for example. So I want to go there today and go, is investing in property part art, part science? Because you speak to some people and it's all gut feel, right? And it's like, that's the arty way to buy property. It's like, I think I like it. It ticks the boxes and bang, I want to buy this property. Whereas you come from it from a very data centric point of view, which, and that's how you pride yourself. So mate, I want to go there, but before we do, just take us on the InvestorKit journey, mate, and kind of talk us from go to woe, how your business has evolved, mate.
So with regards to the journey and how it all started, I guess it was that, like you said, the whole buying for yourself and expanding on the portfolio, and you feel like you can give it a crack and helping others, especially since all the questions keep coming your way as you do it. But in terms of how it's evolved, that data and art piece that you talk about is a great combination that I've learned to appreciate as time has gone on. And I feel that appreciation has come as I've looked back at the types of properties that I felt would perform versus not perform.
Right.
And my personal experience in my portfolio was that, some of my worst looking properties have actually been some of the best performers.
Right.
And that's where the intrigue started for trying to understand the why. I know why I made those decisions, but it's not as easy to quantify it in that open discussion. And so this is what I had to get better at.
Can you give us an example? And I don't want to kind of probe for personal details if you're not happy, but take us through maybe like the ugly ducklings or the ones that you thought.
Of course. So my personal experience takes me to regional Tasmania.
Right.
4 years ago, there was a city called Burnie, crosses near Ulverstone as well. And with the market over there, at that time, there was a lot happening in the property world. It was 2017.
Yeah.
We'd come off about a 5-year bullish run in Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah.
And that boom had obviously a lot of people excited, but also a lot of people kind of fearful because it was a turning point as prices were starting to decline in our major cities. Now, if you wind forward a year, we had close to 15% of declines across most of Sydney during that time. So we can all agree it was a bit scary for someone to go, I'm now going to make an investment decision.
Yeah.
So during that time, I'd been researching the market of Tassie. I'd seen what had happened in Hobart in the years prior, but I saw similar signals that were happening in Burnie.
Right.
Now, what makes me slightly different to the typical investor is that not being born and brought up here in Australia and actually coming from New Zealand, I don't know the difference of regional versus capital.
That's fair.
Like I have no idea of
You're
what.
not wedded to like a capital city.
There's no, as soon as I step into a suburb in Sydney, it's probably bigger than most of my cities that I'm from, right? So you're already talking a capital city just at a suburb level.
Yeah.
So for me, I felt that because of that, I just saw the data for what it was, the location for what it was, and what it presented. Now, the next part was, again, I didn't visit it myself. So from that personal experience of the feel and touch, there wasn't any bias there because I had a moment to think and said, let's just assume I have the metrics right? And assume that a pest and building inspector gives me a feel of the physical parts of the property. What's wrong with it? What's right with it? Property manager gives me their feel from what's wrong and right with it, the location. Locals who are not attached to that transaction give me the same feel. The bank wants to approve it and give you a satisfactory valuation. It rents quickly or it rents for a good amount.
Yeah.
What am I going to physically go there and see and change? So that was my mindset at that time.
Nice.
Now you fast forward 3 or 4 years later and that property has appreciated, by close to 40%.
Nice.
From, a block of units at 365K, which I still pinch myself about that I even purchased a block of units at that price, is now coming close to a 600K bank valuation.
Wonderful.
And so from that perspective, the rents went up, the rents have yielded well. Then I looked at the houses and I realized, would I ever live in these? No. Do I like the look of them? No. But they still did their thing. And so that's kind of where it's got me more and more engaged in the data side of property to go, a lot of these properties, if no one knew where they were, or when they were purchased, any market intel, most people would say no to what you're looking at in front of you. So this is what's really got me intrigued about the data.
Mate, I think you just said something that stands out a lot, which is a lot of people put themselves in that shoe going, but I wouldn't live here. And that often puts them off buying that property because like the kitchen's too small or it's like it's on a busy street. It's like you're not needed to live there. Someone else will pay rent to live there, right? So you had that like level of detachment, which makes for very good investing, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a layer of due diligence that you can do that kind of rules out the many points of is someone going to question that, right? To give you an example, there are your baseline due diligence points of flood, bushfire, too close to a train station, on a busy or main road, extremely small land size. These different factors are a baseline level of everyone, irrespective of if you like living there or not, is going to think about it.
Spot on.
Once you go beyond the baseline, you may like brick, I may like timber, right? You may like a certain style of house or a more open kitchen. I like the kitchen with a bit more character. Or you may like something, now it's just preferences. So we're talking to a certain level that isn't really of importance. So that's kind of where I felt that you could combine that artsy feel if you have, got the due diligence right. But then beyond the due diligence, it doesn't matter as much as people think.
Perfect. So let's go there. So you're talking about due diligence, right? And you definitely kind of stand out as the data-driven buyer's agent. So when you're doing your due diligence, data points, research, insights, I know I've seen you on the ground with being in particular suburbs that you're buying and speaking to the real estate agent. So you've got this inside knowledge. How do you then aggregate all that to then go, I'm distilling this information. This is a good buy to a client. Some people could call it confirmation bias where you're looking for the data to support the evidence, right? How do you take all that and go, with that much data going through your head, how do you help people make that decision?
The process is extremely important here because what I've come to realize, and this is something I go on quite a bit, which is causation versus effect, right? So the cause of growth makes us want to pick out what we think makes a difference. For example, the infrastructure or just a nice place to live in or good schools or a train station that's nearby. So we keep searching for the why I think it's good, which comes to that confirmation bias that always comes up. Whereas the effect of data is if a location is selling faster, it doesn't really matter what's causing it. If the market is obviously diverse in nature, but it doesn't really matter what's causing it because if you asked 5 different people what it may be, they all may give you a different answer.
Spot on.
And so I've learned this from my local conversations. You see me visiting the country in different parts of it, and I speak to locals. One person saying it's COVID because everyone's now moving here.
Yeah.
One person saying, no, it's the locals. It's the infrastructure that's happening here. Another person saying there's just no properties listed and locals are fighting it out with what's there. So there's such a different view of it that when it does come to that aggregate and bringing it all together, I actually start off with what I call market effect rather than market cause.
Nice.
And so there are a select series of indicators, whether it be days on market, whether it be inventory levels, vacancy rates. And I know I'm getting pretty technical here, but as you added these data points, you see a picture. And so you're so used to seeing this picture that you look at it from this perspective. Who am I to say or convince or think this market is going to grow if nothing from the effect angle is showing that?
Yeah.
There's not a reduction in listings. There's not an increase in volume of activity. There's no reduction in the attraction of vacancy rates, so that attraction of rental. There's no reduction in rental listings. There's no increase in rents. So who am I to say that all of this is happening? Because I'm now just guessing that some infrastructure project may make that difference.
Yeah, right.
So what that ends up meaning is that when we're now looking all across the country, firstly, being licensed in many locations, that helps us remove the bias, because it doesn't really matter if it's Queensland growing or South Australia, New South Wales or Vic, we have exposure to go to these locations.
Well, and what do you mean by that?
So what that means is that instead of me having a Queensland-only buyer's agency operation, that will only look for ways to make the data say Queensland's a great place to inspect or buy, we're able to go across most parts of the country because of our multi-state licenses.
So you're so agnostic to where it is. It's just going
exactly
because we're licensed to buy across the country.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've taken that same approach with my portfolio across multiple states. So,
and I think you've even gone across countries.
Across countries. And now it's across 3 with some in New Zealand, some over in USA and some in Australia. So all of that's just that borderless mindset and taking it across. But really when it comes down to it, it's taking those effect pieces and actually reverse engineering.
Right.
Because as you go back and back and back, if there's not a lot of whys as to what's happening, then you've kind of got to get a little bit more curious as to, hey, there's no major infrastructure pieces here. There's no huge job directional shifts or job creation here. There is no major lifestyle appeal here, and it's still moving. This is when you start the visitations even more, the local discussions and so forth.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. A lot of people look at infrastructure projects and go, that's the next hotspot. For example, there's a hospital being built, or there's like the South Australian submarine project, for example, gets announced and go, that's the next hotspot. Whereas I feel like once they're announced, it's almost like it's what I call a lag factor versus a lead factor, right? Lead factors is where you're looking for those data points, for example, whereas lag factor, it means it's announced and you may have missed the mark. So there's no such thing as a hotspot. We'll put that on the table right now, but it's almost like, how are you tracking versus those lead targets and like those metrics versus the lag ones, which says, Byron's a hotspot now and therefore it's going to grow in value. From your data and from your research and your experience, lead versus lag factors, how do you kind of decipher those as well?
Very, very good question. So at any given time when we're buying across locations, there are 3 different types of markets we're buying in. A market that's displaying the early signs of certain market effect movements.
Yeah.
And prices are not outpacing their asking by a lot.
Right.
There is not a huge change in what we're going for when it comes to listing. There might be a speed increase of buying, but there isn't any major change in the offers that we're producing in terms of a 350 listing. Are we putting 400K or are we hovering at 330 to 360? Right.
Yeah.
Second market is where things are going a little bit above asking. And this is not in our control. No matter how good the negotiation efforts are, someone else is willing to pay that little bit more. And then the third is when you start getting, a high level of offers over asking.
Yeah.
Other things that you can track is actually a change in request for inspection versus open home.
Yeah.
And a portion of open homes versus auctions. If we take Adelaide, for example, it's not really an auction city, right?
Yeah.
But many of the inner and middle markets are actually showing some more auctions pop up than they typically would.
Right.
Now that's a sign, even though it's small volumes, there is an increase. It's still an increase nonetheless, and locals are talking about auctions a bit more than they typically were. Some of your regional markets that are, having large days on market, they've had a reduction in the request for open inspections. Take Bundaberg, for example.
Yeah.
I've just been playing a little bit of data check up there on Hervey Bay, Bundaberg, and some of the other regional Queensland areas. they are still at relative pricing to 2012, 2013 for some of their pockets, in Bundaberg in particular. But the reduction in request for an inspection versus an open home, it's huge. So everything used to be request for inspection, because why does an agent want to hold an open home when two people are showing up?
Yeah.
And if you're starting to see that reduce and an open home increase, they are believing that more people are calling out their names to visit them at this property.
Yeah.
And as a result, they feel it's frustrating if I now go and book a whole bunch of requests for inspections.
Yeah.
So these are just some of the small things, but on a scale of these three different buying markets, we're able to sort of pull locations into these three. The first part, like you said, infrastructure, I find it's never just one project that is a make or break or some announcement that's major that's often changing. Because like you said, is it when it's announced? Is it when it's in process and it's being built and construction workers are all on board? Or is it after it's built and people find it's convenient or appealing to them, right? It's too many points to pick up when the perfect sweet spot is.
Yeah.
What I find that's more important than infrastructure in isolation is leadership and direction.
Okay.
Right. You take a Queensland announcement in some parts of Brisbane and you put up an infrastructure for all the Olympic Games that could come up, or infrastructure in one area of, Deception Bay, Petrie, or these areas, or infrastructure in Logan, scattered projects in different areas.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying these are good or bad areas, but the scatter of projects without some sort of direction, a consistent spend in pipeline, that's not as appealing to me as, say, what's happening in South Australia, for example.
Right.
South Australia's one defense massive submarine project isn't what's appealing to me.
Yeah.
It's the combination of healthcare, defense, technology, new emerging industries, how it's spread across so many different regions of Adelaide, and the constant opening of reservoirs now as well for public. Like, there's so many different pieces that are being attacked from a lifestyle, from a health, from job creation, that you can just tell there's a vision and direction behind it.
Yeah, right.
So that's a lot more difficult to align to property values, but that does create more of a difference than it does, say, on I just had this one project coming up and this is going to be big. So just little things like that can make more of a difference of a city's trajectory rather than the one or two big projects.
Yeah, nice. No, well said, mate. It's always those ones where I think sometimes people look for those infrastructures. They look near hospitals. They look what's being built, and they go, these are all the markers. And I'm like, that's just what you're saying is possibly one marker, but you have to look at many more pieces to the puzzle as well. Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm Apache, like, hey, I've got something here coming up, that is not reliable for me as a researcher to put it all together.
Yeah.
If I see a chain of so many different things in the pipeline and starting to come through, this is me saying something new is happening here. And Toowoomba's another city, right? There's so much directional change there. There's so much wind, solar energy that's coming up alongside so many other micro pieces of infrastructure. You can see that this isn't just any other year in Toowoomba. This is a change of what's happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to change tax a little bit here and go a bit personal, right? Because I know I saw you posted a while that you sold your car. You had a nice, beautiful car. When you were downgraded, I mean, I look at cars as a mode of transport. I used to love my vehicles. I used to have a brand new Golf GTI, as you had a brand new Mercedes, I understand as well, right? I sold my car, one for, I don't need it. Two, I want to free up my borrowing capacity because a lease is in effect dead money. And I actually want to put that money back into an income producing asset versus a depreciating liability. So I just want to go there for you and just say, look, take us through that decision, because I look at it as a very mature decision. Often people look at your vehicle as a status symbol and you're going, hang on, mate, just 4 wheels. Take us through kind of your rationale there.
Yeah, look, there was a whole bunch of different events coming together last year. Last year was both, look, it's challenging for everyone.
Yeah.
But the different events that came up my way were, mum's passing. That was pretty big for me last year. Yeah. But what that did alongside a few other chain of events is it just made me realize what's really important to me. And I wanted to up the gear on having just experiences, a life full of experiences.
Yeah.
And so the way I dressed started changing. I don't think I've worn a suit for a while.
You and I both. Yeah.
I've got about 20 pair of these shirts, the same black, and Culture Kings does great specials for anyone wondering. So I think it was 4 for $60.
What's your promo code?
4 for $60 or something, or 4 for $70. But that combination of minimizing my life,
nice.
I've never donated as much as I have over the last year than I have, this year here.
Wonderful.
So, that then led to a moment where I just felt that, it'd be cool to have a 4-wheel drive as part of the whole experience part. So I downgraded to a Pajero.
Yep.
But also I just didn't have that care factor of how I looked. And I think the benefit of being a researcher is that you get to have all the numbers to do all the talking. So you don't have to kind of sit in front of someone and always think about that perception as much. But I feel like a combination of my professional life that was changing, my personal sort of things after having that tragic event happen at home, thinking, does this all matter? That was a big change for me. Those are the biggest reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I bring that up is because quite often from a finance point of view, an expensive lease, for example, or a car, if you finance it or not, can actually bring down your borrowing capacity. And the amount of times I'll tell that to people going, look, this lease is great, but do you need such an expensive vehicle? And, your borrowing capacity would shoot up if you got rid of the lease, for example. And I did it because I wanted to, if I'm going to live and breathe it and tell clients, I've got to take my own advice. And I did. And when I saw that, I applauded you because it's a bold statement. The first thing people think is, mate, you can't afford the car or his business not going great, but it's actually the exact opposite. You're so comfortable in your own skin that you go, hey, look, I don't need this to kind of validate myself as well. So it's something that I just want to kind of say, look, put on the record and say, mate, well done. Because these are some of the markers that I feel like lifestyle creep with investors, lifestyle creep in business, lifestyle creep when I often say when people get a salary increase, they've often spent it before they've earned it because they go and buy new suits, new watches, for example. And so for investors, we're always trying to say, hey, look, how can you get your money working harder for you? So on that point, mistakes that you tend to see investors make, we could see all types of portfolios, right? Good, bad, ugly. So when you're looking at portfolios, what's some of the mistakes that you've seen people make?
Yeah. I feel like that, with that same income statement that you made, a preference of what you want in property starts to change too.
Right.
I actually notice many clients who start earning a lot more feel their property should look a certain way, or be it in a suburb of a certain prestige because of it, even if they may not be from that city. Okay. So sometimes there might be people living, in the inner west or east of Sydney, and they might think of the location in that other city that needs to be equivalent of. Yeah. And so that creates a lot of, the blinkers get put on. And if I think of that Burnie, Tasmania region and how much I purchased that property for and the equity that's given me, which I'm in the process of, looking at and trying to get out, that's a clear example of a simple mistake where we feel that the lifestyle of an investment needs to match us.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think comes up quite often is, like you said, that understanding of finance actually comes before understanding of the location and the property. And I'm sure, you get this question coming up so much around borrowing capacity and how I go again or how I do this. And I feel when it comes to a budget, call it 800K or 700K that someone may have, they immediately assume that they need to use all of it for the first purchase.
Yeah.
And so then they assume that investing's done now because I've now purchased that and I need to wait until substantial changes come up. And so this relaxed approach to not consistently being engaged with your financier or mortgage broker and constantly, strategizing and having tactics for the next, it makes them kind of sit back and relax, and then they actually wait all the way up until they save something.
Yeah.
Have some money, have a change in job, and they're like, I'd like to go again. When if they really took that moment to go, I've settled in this, I've grown my equity, I'm checking in my portfolio, I'm checking in my borrowing capacity. Is it bank A or could it be bank C? So these are these different things I feel.
Bank that you've never heard of.
Exactly, right? My last one, I never even heard of them.
Totally.
Couldn't even put them on a fridge magnet. That's how much I never even heard of them. And so I feel those two big mistakes, the purchase of region, matching how you live or want to be seen as living. And then the second one is not making certain assumptions and just constantly having that team and relationship around you. So
And if we flip it on its head, your ideal clients, for example, the ones that have tend to do really well, what's been their attributes or traits, mate?
I find outside of equity growth, there's things happening in a personal front too.
Nice.
So money habits with regards to how much they're saving per month. So the constant conversation is not about when the property doubles to them go again. The conversation around scaling a portfolio is this whole holistic approach around we'll check in on valuations with you and your broker together.
Nice.
We'll buy in the right locations. You'll be focused on the savings per month to get to X goal. Alongside that, the drive around what they're doing for work, whether it be, being the best in that specific role that they're in, or whether it be aspiring for career growth that comes with it in their role or in some other industry, that's up to them.
Yeah.
But that combination of this holistic feel of my income, my savings, my team, and then my accountability. That's where I find the clients that do scale a portfolio really go nail it.
I love it, mate. And quite often I find that people will invest in property or shares or crypto before they even think about investing in themselves. And I'm like, the single best dollar you will spend is investing in yourself. You grow your mindset, you grow your strengths, you grow your being comfortable in your own skin. It will make you a better investor. It'll make you a better person, for example. It makes you better at your job. All the above, isn't it?
Mate, it's a huge difference maker. I mean, even on a more micro level, like who you spend your time with.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I challenge someone who's looking to invest in property to spend time with a friend who's anti-property every single week.
Nice.
Just do it and you will see yourself change. You won't be as motivated as investing in property. You won't be as, keen to go and get ready for the next one. You won't be thinking about it as much.
Do you see that sometimes with couples? And I'm not saying him or her, for example, but sometimes one partner in the relationship is pro-property and one's a little bit more conservative or defensive. Maybe they've had a bad experience. Their parents have had a bad experience and that kind of taints their outlook, for example. And so person A is a little bit more bullish and person B is bearish and it's going, now they're hesitant. And so, I mean, I deal with Bernadette and I have very, very different kind of risk appetites, right? I can sleep with a mountain of debt and Bernadette doesn't like debt. And you can kind of guess who wins in that situation. And again, it's not about winning or losing, but it's more just around exactly that point where one voice may be louder than the other. So when you do it couples, for example, and even in your experience, how have you kind of handled that?
I feel the most common thing that happens as a result of that one person and the other person being in total opposites is that all the times when I think of working with those type of clients, they've actually been late starters.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
It's very rare that opposite direction has happened so early in life and I'm now working with them. They're usually not even coming to work with me until it's so late in life where they've come to a realization that, yes, we're different, but we still have to do something.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And so you see it pop up in the micro stages of the process. For example, one person may go, this sounds great. Let's give it a go. It's the first one. And the other person may go, oh, well, maybe we should see a few more places before that comes up or something like that. Right. That's very common. Now, in terms of working through with it, I find the best way to do it is actually not come across as the expert all the time. And what I mean by that is there will be decisions. And actually most of the times when they state a point, if you factually looked at the point of the opposite, it's not wrong. It's just different. And so I've always learned to keep acknowledging that throughout the process.
Yeah.
Like X person, whether it be the husband or wife, you're not wrong. Like what he or she is saying about maybe do we need to buy this expensive or do we need to have the debt? What about finding a tenant or what about the feel? Nothing's wrong. So I think acknowledging that they're not wrong in a relationship as someone's talking to each other, whether I'm involved or not involved, is the first starting point. And then from there, it really is about kind of finding that sweet spot, right? So me and my wife, just to bring it up, like we are both very much the same in terms of the outcome we want to get to.
Yeah.
I actually am a person who will think out the 10 or 20 different decisions and things that could go right and wrong. And then she kind of just gift wraps it all and goes, do it.
Right. Okay.
So she'll give me that push.
So she's crayons and your pen.
Yeah. I'm just constantly go think. Yeah. I wouldn't call it to a stage of paralysis analysis, but I'd say that because of her being there, I don't have paralysis analysis. So she's the push of the decision making. I'll have, certain visions and thoughts and ideas, but then 10 minutes later, I'll tell her about what's wrong with those vision, thoughts and ideas. And she'll be like, no, back yourself. Yeah, and nice. So that's kind of where we have ours.
Wonderful, mate. Thanks very much. I guess as a kind of a parting gift to some of the listeners, from your own experience, if you talk to, say, investors that are on the journey that are looking to kind of maybe they're stuck a little bit, they're not sure about what the next step is. What's kind of your advice or your guidance to them?
Yeah. So when it comes to being stuck, it's usually to do with two things. One is financially stuck.
Right.
Or the other is you don't have a plan. And so sometimes what happens is with the financially being stuck, it just comes back to, having that discussion with their team around them and trying to understand where they're really headed. And that kind of answers that plan part along the way. But when it comes to the plan being stuck, it's usually because someone's just doing nothing but buying.
Yeah.
And buying itself is, yes, a key part of the property journey, but it's the part where people get bored because they don't know when it's going to stop. They don't know which direction they're going or why they're doing it. And they're just constantly searching for the next one, and they feel disappointed when they can't make that next one happen as soon as possible.
Yeah, okay.
And so I feel that when you're planning, it needs to consist of the strategy of what type of assets that you want to hold and buy, so you don't get distracted by the shiny things and you then kind of feel like you're stuck.
Yeah.
B is it comes with certain timelines attached to it. I would love to buy every single property that I recommend to my customers, but is it really realistic for me to have over 100 properties each year added on each year? I don't think so, right? Yeah. But if I stick to my true self of, okay, my strategy that I wants to buy a type of asset.
Yeah.
I want to do that 1 time a year or 2 times a year. It will come.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective of plan or financially stuck, this is where the team around you can really loop that in together and reduce those, I guess, pressure on you, the weight on you. That's where I feel the issues really rise.
Nice one, mate. Thank you so much. Mate, we'll put the details for someone to reach out to you. Look, I know you've got a really strong online presence, and it says a lot about you, a lot about your business. The reviews say a lot, for example. So I know your heart's in the right place, and your team's heart's in the right place as well. And I guess in an industry where people are just trying to make not a quick buck, but property sells, right? The dream of property can sell. Whereas I feel like you guys and some really other good quality buyers agents that we've interviewed, like, you walk the talk. And I'm so grateful you've been able to spend time with us, mate. I really appreciate it. I hope you found that helpful as well. I know Arjun's answered a lot of questions that our clients typically have as well. If you want to get in touch with Arjun and his team at InvestorKit, you'll find the details below. This has been another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast, all about helping you make better property decisions. I'm Aaron-Christie David. I'll chat to you next time. Thanks very much.